And now, Katelynito, and Rennellito will read 100 trains, 100 years.
Okay. I think we might find some interesting stuff in here.
Interesting
Let's move
pictures
over.
Okay.
of information.
That's good.
Mm.
We're not going to read the manuscript and lost. It's in steam engine
Okay.
and the Amtrak. These are some cool pictures,
Ooh, those are cool.
but we can read.
1998, Middletown and Hummelstown Railroad number 1016. As the 1990s roll on and the end of the 20th century approaches, North America's mainline railroads feature ever more powerful, ever more sophisticated motive power from General Electric and General Motors EMD. But for scores of little short-line operations, second-hand decades-old locomotives are, and always have been, the order of the day, still rendering yeoman's service on freight runs through small-town America. Witness the colorful end-cab diesel switcher shown here, Middletown and Hummelstown Railroad number 1016, a hardy example of Alco's T6, a 1000 HP transfer switcher that debuted in 1958.
1999, Delaware Lackawanna Railroad number 310. Before looking forward to the year 2000 and a new millennium, we have chosen to mark the 20th century's last year by literally looking back at a century still going strong. A C420, the first of Alco's Century series of road switchers introduced in the 1960s, although the Schenectady shop that produced it, at one time the world's largest, has been closed for 30 years. This Alco hauler and others like it continue to serve the industry faithfully and well in 1999. Photographed in the final year of the millennium, Delaware Lackawanna number 310, a C420 built by the former American Locomotive Company in 1964, shows the signs of wear one would expect to see after 35 years on the job. But along with the thousands of locomotives that have gone before it, it represents the inestimable contribution that railroading has made to the fabric of this remarkable century.
And here's the picture.
Here's a picture of it on the left.
Let's move on to the next.
Woo!
Yeah,
Amtrak.
Look at the Amtrak Excella.
Would you like me to?
Okay.
In the year 2000, the promise of U.S. high-speed rail travel is finally becoming a reality with Amtrak's new Excella.
So,
Earlier American efforts to utilize European high-speed developments, including Amtrak's own 1980s experiment with the French Turboliner and the Canadian LRC, fizzled out due to the expense of roadbed improvements. But in 1999, with necessary track improvements in place, Amtrak began converting its Northeastern Corridor Metroliner operations to what it calls Excella service, from acceleration and excellence, spearheaded by a new high-speed electric train. The Excella train set was developed by a consortium of Canada's best Bombardier and France's Alstom, the builder of the TGV. Like the earlier LRC employed tilt technology to produce a smooth ride at speeds up to 150 miles per hour, and will ultimately cut Washington-New York trips times to less than 3 hours. 20 Excella trains are scheduled to be in service in early fall 2000. This one was photographed during testing in the summer of 1999. Here is the photograph.
But the TGV trains over there in France, if you know about it, Pat,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the TGV trains, that Amtrak's new logo, their new symbol, is looking like it's stepping into the future with the TGV trains
Huh.
that everybody in France knows and loves.
Well, that's good. Maybe it'll be a bit of a diplomatic move between the U.S. and France to combine the TGV and
Nice
this.
picture.
We show a picture too.
It's an Amtrak train, similar to the one we saw.
Earlier today. '91 Consolidated Rail Corporation, Conrail number 6151. Whether you still call it by its popular name, -840CW, or by General Electric's official designation of C48W, this wide-cab microprocessor-controlled diesel has spearheaded GE's drive to supremacy in the locomotive market of the 1990s. Following up its successful -7 series of freight haulers with the -8s in the second half of the 1980s, GE barreled headlong into the new decade with several variations of the series. Hardly 4,000 HP entry of the C48. The most popular variant of the C48W seen here employs a wide-nosed cab with its corners dropped to allow the crew in the cab to see who is standing on the steps. In production from 1989 to 1995 and still occasionally built to order, it is a symbol of modern railroading, with about 875 units on the rails today, as witnessed by this 1999 photo of the Conrail number 6151, a C48W built in 1991.
Can you stop?
Should we show the picture?
Anything.
You want to read about this one?
Yeah.
You want to read about that?
Right. 1992, SOO line number 6059. In the confusing world of modern diesel locomotives, it's not surprising that it's easier to tell the difference between an SD60M and an SD60 than to tell the same SD60 from SD50. How? I know. Well, while the 3800 HP SD60 is virtually identical to the 3500 HP SD50, the wide nose of the SD60M, the North American cab, makes it easy to distinguish from the standard SD60. More than 500 SD60Ms have been built since AMD introduced the model in 1989. SOO line purchased 5, including number 6059, seen in a dramatic night photo taken in 1992, the year it was manufactured. The Midwestern SOO line was created by the 1961 merger of the Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Sault Ste. Marie, the Wisconsin Central, the Duluth South Shore Atlantic. Currently controlled by Canadian Pacific Railway, the 4,500 plus mile system derived its name from the proper pronunciation of salt in Sault Ste. Marie.
What's you laughing for?
And here's a photograph of the 6059.
Beautiful photograph.
A dramatic night photograph.
Very, very professional. Knows the professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
What? Yeah.
Good book. Lots to be learned. Another beautiful picture of an Amtrak train that we should show the home
Gorgeous
viewers.
photograph.
Very much like the train we saw today. Yes, Rennell?
Yeah.
Should I read this one? 1990 to 2000. As the American century, a time whose remarkable progress owes much to the nation's railroads, draws to a close, old train soldier on. While high-speed trains in Europe, Asia, and the United States offer a glimpse of rail technology for the next century and beyond. Another very professional picture, wouldn't you say, Lynch?
Yeah.
Excellent photograph. Moving on. Okay. 1985 Canadian Pacific Railway, CP Rail number 3057. In a classic winter scene sure to warm the heart of North American rail fans, especially those partial to the venerable Canadian Pacific Railway.
I wonder if we can read and show the picture at the same time. Beautiful.
Okay. CP Railroad number 3057 trundles away across a snowy landscape in 1996. A fine example of one of EMD's most successful locomotives ever. This particular GP382 was built in late 1985. One of 115 later models produced from Canadian Pacific between 1983 and 1987. That featured the free flow blower duct introduced in 1982. Visible on the side after all the numbers under 10.
That was hard.
Good
It's hard
picture,
to
though.
do that. As I said, the TGV trains.
Of France.
Everybody knows and loves.
You
As
gotta
I
love the
said.
TGV trains. Do you want me to read about the TGV trains?
Yeah.
1979, SNCF, French National Railways, TGV. The attainment of higher speeds has been a major concern in virtually all transportation technologies throughout this century, and railroads are no exception. Since the steam age, locomotive designers have striven to propel passengers and freight faster than before. In Europe, electric motive power has been employed for decades to whisk passengers at record speeds. And the French company Alstom, did I pronounce that correctly now? Alstom?
Yeah.
Has been a major player in the development of the high-speed electric train since mid-century. After two experimental French electrics exceeded 200 miles an hour in tests in 1955, the industry moved gradually toward producing a train that could top 150 miles an hour in a normal passenger operation. The result was Alstom's TGV, Train à Grande Vitesse. I don't speak French. An articulated electric train set that began operations on SNCF's Paris-Loins line in the late 1970s. Originally designed with a gas turbine but electrified after the 1973 oil crisis, the TGV operates at close to 170 miles per hour. In 1981, one set a new world record of 236 miles per hour. This 1999 photo, taken at a railroad station at Perpignan, France, features TGV number 4528. Should we show the picture to the home audience?
Katelyn,
She laughs a
please.
lot.
Can she not laugh at all during this?
Kind of. Yeah.
Let's be serious.
Yes, please.
Seriousness.
1980 to 1989. Horsepower seems to climb with the introduction of each new diesel hauler, and the nation's freight moves are at an ever-increasing rate. As the ridership of suburban commuter trains grows, innovative technology still strives for increased speed and comfort. Here's a photograph of the 445.
Let's hope it gets the best picture of us.
The 1975 Stourbridge Railroad number 44. At first glance, this bright yellow road switcher trundling through a snow-covered field may look just like another among thousands of slightly varying freight haulers. built by industry giant General Motors EMD since the mid-1960s. But the colorful history of this unique EMD locomotive, the 1500 HP CF7, is a bit more complicated than most, and in fact starts back in the early 1950s. Like every CF7, the general-purpose road switcher began life 2 decades earlier as a classic EMD F7A freight locomotive, built between 1949 and 1953 for the historic Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. In a massive rebuilding program from 1970 through 1978, the AT and SF shops in Cleburne, Texas, used new Geep hoods, underframes, and other parts to transform 233 tired F7As into gleaming new CF7s. After years with the Santa Fe, many CF7s now haul freight on short lines across the country, like number 44, photographed at work for Pennsylvania's Stourbridge Railroad on a bright winter's day in 1992. What a beautiful shot, don't you think, Rennell?
Yeah.
I love trains.
So you can't.
Which one? 1971, Consolidated Rail Corporation, Conrail, number 7896. Following up on the successful debut of the 3000 HP GP40 locomotive in 1965, General Motors EMD guessed that the market also had room for a hauler with slightly less horsepower, and the GP38 proved them right. A high-hooded, versatile 2000 HP Jeep designed Jeep or Jeep? Jeep. Designed to run hard and long, the GP38 turned out to be just what many railroads needed. It sold so well during its initial production run, over 700 units between 1966 and 1971, that EMD launched an even more successful GP38-2 in 1972. All told, nearly 3,000 GP38s and GP32s went into the service lines throughout the United States and Canada, and many are still in there kicking. One of them is shown here wearing vivid Conrail blue in 1993. Locomotive number 7896, a GP38 built toward the end of the production run in 1970.
You don't want that in our video.
Short break means the door.
Should we see who's at the door now?
Break.
Okay, we'll be back after this quick break. Welcome back to more from 100 Trains, 100 Years. Moving right along.
Next picture.
Here's the
1970 to 1979.
1970 to 1979. After the demise of Alco in the 60s, General Motors and General Electric dominate the diesel locomotive market. With many of America's lines in the turmoil, Amtrak and Conrail are created, and an electric train from France becomes the world's fastest, which we just read about. Going back in time a few years. Introductions.
Here's an interesting picture.
Very interesting picture.
I feel like the readers on our trains today.
Katelyn, would you read that first paragraph? We'll switch paragraph by paragraph.
Train. It's quite a potent little word, one that conjures up immediate images of power, movement, adventure, and excitement. And there are probably very few people on Earth who can't instantly recognize the meaning of that word, in any language, or what the remarkable machine it described has done for our society in the past 150 years.
Traveling at greater speeds and with less effort and expense has long been a preoccupation with the human animal, and never more so than in the industrialized culture of the 19th and 20th centuries. Consider for a moment the number of ways in which this society has striven to go farther and faster over the last 100 years. Then think about the most efficient way we've found to move large amounts of our stuff and great numbers of ourselves over land in one time. And there's that word again, train.
Although railroading as we know it began in earnest during the first quarter of the 19th century, the last 100 years have witnessed quite a bit of history on the rails. And the trains that have come and gone during that time have played a crucial role in our nation and in the lives of its people.
Now, standing on the brink of the 21st century and the new millennium, we look back at every year of the previous century to discover 100 very special trains. Each of them has touched countless lives, and each its own particular story to tell. The chronology.
The authors have considered each year since 1900 and have selected a locomotive, train set, piece of rolling stock, or other railroad equipment to represent it. In many cases, the subject was built, purchased, or actually in service during that year. In others, it may have been connected with a significant historical event or trend, or it is an example of a type introduced into Rennell at that time. We based our selections on a number of criteria, including historical significance, uniqueness, aesthetic qualities, technical innovations, availability, individual history, and visual excitement, as well as that special something that draws both veteran rail fans and the casual observer to a particular locomotive or train.
Wherever possible, we've selected machines in operating condition and still in active service for passenger freight, tourist railroads, or rail museums. Others are currently on static display at museums or historic sites. Many of the trains on these pages are the property of working railroads, while others are owned and maintained by many fine museums and historical societies dedicated to preserving railroading's rich heritage. The trains.
A process filled with constant discovery, the production of this book has enabled us to become familiar with seemingly infinite variety of equipment produced and operated by North American railroads during the 20th century, along with images of locomotives powered by steam, electric traction, diesel-electric motors, and gas turbines, and other propulsion methods. These images also represent an array of diverse rolling stock.
What you laughing for?
I couldn't read that one. Of diverse rolling stock, self-propelled rail cars, train sets, interurbans, passenger coaches, sleeper cars, freight gondolas, tank engines, box cars, yard switchers, wrecking cranes, and the list goes on.
Some list indeed. A range of we're still right here, my friend. A range of significant producers of the 20th century rail freight, passenger, and work equipment manufactured the trains featured in this book. The work of such firms as the American Locomotive Company, ALCO, Baldwin Lima General Motors Electromotive Division, General Electric, Budd, Pullman Standard, Montreal Locomotive Works, Bombardier, Alstom, Morrison, Consid, H.K. Porter, J.G. Brill, and many others is represented here. We've striven to impart as much information about these builders and their individual models as availability and space would allow. The railroads.
Finally, in showcasing the trains that helped shape the 20th century, we have also attempted to introduce to the reader those storied institutions that made them possible. The railroads themselves, from vast national systems to tiny local short lines. The lines represented in these pages include Union Pacific, New York Central, Pennsylvania Railroad, Nickel Plate Road, New Haven, Baltimore, and Ohio. Canadian Pacific, Chesapeake and Ohio, Sioux Line, Delaware, Lackawanna, FEC, Boston, Maine, Reading Erie Railroad, Western Maryland, Lehigh Valley, Amtrak, Conrail, and many others. A century on the rails.
Along with the Industrial Revolution, the first half of the 19th century had given birth to the railroads, and the second half had launched their golden age. Throughout those years, the 440 type steam locomotive, employing 4 pilot wheels in front, 4 driving wheels, and no trailing wheels, became the dominant engine on American rail tracks, with nearly 25,000 ultimately in use. Typified by the general of Civil War fame and emblematic of the Old West, the configuration was so closely associated with the U.S. railroads it was simply known as the American Standard.
But as the 19th century wore on, the quest for greater locomotive power signaled the end of the 440's reign. By that time, enterprising era gave way to the 20th century. A new generation of engineers, inventors, industrialists, and railroad men were striving to speed the transport of passengers and freight by rail, and earn bigger and bigger profits by creating bigger and faster locomotives. Most still used steam power, but others employed versions of the internal combustion engine or electric motors, or combinations of the two. And, as you will see for yourself, the results of these efforts were, if not always, successful, and at least indelible proof that there really is something about a train.
That was some introduction.
Yes. Two more.
That's
That's
a
a
nice
great picture.
photograph.
Let's show this picture.
A train going
Very
through a
professional.
field.
Very professional.
Two more readings.
Two more readings.
This book is so filled with information.
Potent. It's reeking of information.
1966, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, number 3684. Enjoying the lion's share of sales in the virtually every variety of diesel-electric locomotive produced right through the 1960s, General Motors EMD introduced yet another geek to the fold in 1965, the 3000 HP GP40. Two successive and successful versions of this mighty hauler, the GP40, produced until 1971, and the GP42, or Dash 2, built between 1972 and 1986, helped EMD to continue its dominance in the diesel market for decades. The first of its type built for and delivered to the Baltimore and Ohio for freight duties in 1966, GP40 number 3684 was renumbered CSXT number 6500 after completing 3 decades active service. In 1994, it was repainted to its original appearance for display at Baltimore's B&O Museum.
Get a fabulous picture of it right on the top here. And finally, last but certainly not least, right, Rennell, the 1967 Lackawanna Valley Railroad number 901. Upping the ante in its ongoing horsepower race with competitors Alco and GM's EMD, General Electric developed progressively more powerful versions of its U-boat diesel round switchers in the mid-1960s. From the original 2500 HP U-25B introduced earlier in the decade, GE cranked things up by bringing out the 2800 HP U-28B in 1966, then pushed them even further later that year with the 3000 HP U-30B. This successful design would stay in production through 1975, even as GE developed other Universal Series switchers with the 3300 and 3600 HP ratings. Although early units were barely distinguishable from some of their U-28B cousins, later U-30Bs featured a snub nose and fairly distinctive radiator patterns. The one shown here, manufactured in 1967, rendered service for the New York Central before assuming its current identity as Lackawanna Valley number 901. Take a look at this beautiful train. Just one more picture in case they were looking at this one last time. Of the Lackawanna Valley 901. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yes. Bye.
But
And we're hugging.
We're hugging.
And we're hugging.
Everyone, that was 100 trains, 100 years.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
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 Yay.
love trains.
I love trains.